Well, hello.
We're back.
Finally. So sorry for the long pause, but we've had loads to do. But we're back at it now, and welcome to our first video.
This is the plan for this adventure over here in Canada.
Yay!
We're Sarah and Ben. Welcome back to Diamonds on Tour. Well, the basic plan was to ship our van over to Halifax in Nova Scotia, over here in Canada. You may notice we're already there. And then we're going to be driving all the way across Canada, reach Calgary, turn right, go up the Rockies, into Yukon, up to Tuktoyaktuk, and back down to Whitehorse, then across into Alaska, back down through Western Canada, into the States, through to Mexico, and onwards, possibly even as far as Ushuaia in Argentina, but we'll see about that.
Yes, we're over here in Canada for 5 months, then we're going back home for a month, and then come back again, pick the van up in Whitehorse where we've had it parked up, and then we'll be over again for 6 months, do 6 months, and then we have to go back for 6 months. Now all this is to do with travel insurance, and I'm going to let Ben explain why.
Yeah, so as a really a product of our ages and some pretty minor, but nevertheless the insurance companies take notice of them, some minor pre-existing health conditions
that need tablets.
Need tablets. Only basic stuff, hypertension and cholesterol, that sort of stuff that we all have at our age. So they'll only give us 6 months insurance at a time. So we've got to come over for that first 6 months insurance, then go back, then come back. And then after the second sort of period of 6 months, we have to have been in the UK for 6 months out of every 12. So we then need to stay 6 months in the UK, and then we can get another 6 months insurance and onwards. So we'll be doing that in sort of these steps, these 6 month steps, for as long as it takes to do this trip, really.
Yeah, which means it's going to cost us a bit to keep flying backwards and forwards, but at least it means we can leave the van here. We'll find safe places to leave the van. We've already sorted out our first place, and then we just have to fly back then to come and take up the journey again. So in some ways it's really quite nice, because it does mean that we get to see our families and friends, and we won't get burnout, which I know happens to some people that do these massively long trips. So it's bittersweet, really, isn't it? And doing the first leg, Ben mentioned that we're stopping in Canada actually for the first 5 months, not entering into Alaska at all, because that saves us, would you believe this, it saves us £2,000 on our 6 month insurance, which is incredible. I mean, it's enough anyway, coming over to Canada, travel insurance for us. And again, it's about age, pre-existing health conditions, blah, 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 blah. It's costing us 2,000 for this leg.
It's 2,200.
2,200 for this leg. As soon as we bob into the States, that would have added another 2,000 onto it, even if we were in the States for 1 day. So hence us just staying out of the States for this first 5 months, and then we'll take the hit on the next 6 months, and we'll do the States, Alaska, and the rest of it, however quickly we go through it. We'll do that in the following 6 months and just take the hit on the insurance then.
And that is purely because of the cost of healthcare in the US. Enough said on that, I think, really. Just one quick point on leaving the van here for a month when we travel back home. We had quite an interesting conversation with the customs officer when we were getting customs clearance for the van when we shipped it into Halifax. He basically said you can't do that, because the van's on a temporary import, it has to be accompanied by its owner at all times. So if you leave it unattended, effectively they could impound it. Now obviously we don't want that, and it's because they need a guarantee that we are definitely coming back for it later. Now, we didn't have any proof of flights back to Canada in September, so he was very good. and he basically gave us a special ticket to put in the windscreen of the van when it's left unattended, which tells any police or customs officers that it has approval to remain for no more than 1 month unattended, and it's actually going to be on a relative's driveway, so it's not just in a car park or something. So we're pretty confident it'll be fine. That customs guy was cool. He sorted us out. He was the
most serious person that we've ever encountered.
Stay still.
Yeah, I'm going to stay still.
Hold that. Oh, that was close. Very nearly dropped my phone in the river.
I hope he keeps that in.
We found a beautiful spot here at the side of this creek. We're just down the road from our park up here in the north of Nova Scotia, just before you get onto Cape Breton.
Place called Monastery.
Yeah, and beautiful. We'll tell you more about that in another video later on, because we are a week into our travels now, so we'll be dipping back in time later for our next video when we start our travels. As far as visas go, we've used the ETA, the electronic travel approval system for getting into Canada. That gives us up to 6 months with no problems at all. For going into the US, we've had to apply for the B2 visa, which is the one where that gives you 6 months at a time for up to 10 years. So as many visits as you like that you can fit into that 10-year gap. It does remain to be seen right now, and this is March 2025, and you know what's happening in the world right now. There are people getting turned away at the US border for a whole range of different reasons, even people with those visas. So in 6 months or so time, when we try to enter Alaska, we'll see what happens. There's nothing guaranteed at the moment. There was nothing to do for the van for getting into Canada other than making sure it's really clean. They're very, very concerned about biosecurity, so any mud or seeds or organic material on the van, it had to be properly clean, and they can charge you for steam cleaning if they really want to at the port. Ours was fine, so that's just a little detail you have to do. For the US, because the van isn't it's a European spec van, so it's a Euro 5 engine, but that's not recognised in the States, so you have to apply for an exemption to the American Environmental Protection Agency, and you get a letter just saying this vehicle is exempt. I think it only cost about $10, didn't it? And just a little detail, but again, that's not relevant until another 6 months time when we enter the US, but it's something we had to do for this trip.
For driving over here, we also needed to get an international driver's permit, which you can pick up from a number of stores in the UK. Now, you'd think you'd go to the post office, but they no longer do it. So we actually picked ours up from a local liquor store, would you believe? They had them there. They're very inexpensive. Was it £5 each or something?
£6.
£6 each. And that you take along a photograph, the person sticks it in this little grey thing, stamps it, boom, 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 Bob's your uncle, and all sorted. So we have those on us at all times.
They're valid for 12 months.
Yeah.
And the reason it was a liquor store, it's a service in Britain called, I think it's called MoneyGram, isn't it?
PayPoint.
The reason we got them from a liquor store is there's this service in Britain called PayPoint, which is a thing where you can go and make transfers of money to people and sort of international transfers, a bit like that, what's that Western thing?
Oh yeah, Western Union.
Yeah, a bit like Western Union. And so various shops and places kind of use this service. And the one that's nearest to us was a liquor store. So it did feel a bit weird going to a liquor store for your driving permit. But there you go. That's the system they use.
Absolutely. And we don't call them liquor stores, incidentally, in the UK. No.
It's an off licence in the UK.
Yeah.
Now, you know I like to get the old cinematic shots from the drone of all these beautiful places that we come and visit. I wanted to do it right. Perhaps I'll go a little bit over the top with that, but I researched how to do that over here in Canada. And I've actually done the learning and sat the examination to get the licence for flying drones over here in Canada. And I've also had to apply for an exemption, a special certificate for my actual drone, because it's not a registered aircraft here in Canada. So you get this exemption to allow you to fly a foreign registered aircraft in this country. Now that is a bit over the top. You don't have to do that. If your drone is one of these new ones which is below 250 grams, that's the easy way around it. Just get one of those little ones, and there's no laws or no licensing necessary. But I took the option because I'd already got the knowledge from having the sort of professional qualification for commercial operations in the UK. So I had the knowledge, so I was able to do the exams with really very little work.
And your drone was over 250
Oh yeah,
grams.
and I had to do that because my drone's Mavic 2 Pro, so it's over the 250 grams level.
And he wasn't having another one?
No, not yet. So it was a lot easier and cheaper to just do the qualification, do it all legally, so it's properly insured and covered for everything like that. It can go wrong quite badly with a drone, so I just wanted to be covered, belt and braces like that.
Okay, how do we get down here? This way?
Right, we're going to go and relocate without falling in the river. But I will keep the camera rolling just in case.
Safe. Marked as safe.
Perfect. Back up to the road. Right then, van insurance. So that's your insurance for driving on the roads, for your liability, you know, for accidents and all the rest of it. That was a bit of a challenge. There's a lot of companies that advertise RV insurance for travelling over here. I contacted, I think, most of them, and they all said no, I'm afraid. It was the answer was always, sorry, we don't offer that anymore. I eventually found a place called RV Insurance Services, who are based in Texas, and they have provided a cover for 12 months. It was quite pricey though, $1,250. So that's about 1,100 Great British pounds. To put that in comparison, fully comprehensive insurance for us for Europe, which allowed us to travel unlimited all around Europe for a year, was £280. So kind of 4 times the price for insurance in the US. And that of course covers us for Canada as well. So yeah, not cheap, but nothing is really, is it, when you're doing this sort of game?
It certainly isn't, no.
Yeah, so anyway, there you go, that's insurance.
In addition, we had to make quite a few modifications to the van to make sure that we were ready for this trip. So Ben's going to take you back in time now to tell you all about those.
Yeah, see me downstairs in the garage when the van was still in England. Now this is the first and probably one of the biggest things that we've had to change with shipping our van. This is something which I was very, very proud of when I first did it. It's a battery. So this is a home-built 560 amp hour battery. Basically got 8 cells in there which are all 280 amp hours, 4 there and 4 there, each one making a separate battery and then parallel together to give 560 amp hours, using daily battery management systems and active balancing devices. So this was fantastic. It cost total of about £1,100, which at the time was a fraction of the cost that an off-the-shelf battery would have. The snag though that I've learned from the shipping company is that it doesn't have an MSDS, a material safety data sheet, or a UN 38.3 test report. The individual cells do, so I could show that the individual cells were properly tested and certified and everything, but as a whole the battery should be tested and certified accordingly. So the shipping company just wouldn't allow this to go on the ship. Shipping companies across the world are getting very, very twitchy about lithium batteries. So in the absence of these test reports, we've had to bite the bullet and buy a new battery. Now, one advantage is that in the 3 years since I built this, the cost of lithium batteries has plummeted, and I was able to get a brand new Fogstar Drift Pro battery, 560 amp hours, for £1,300. So an expense that we didn't want to make, we didn't expect to have to make, but actually it was way less than the £4,500 that that size battery would have been about 3 to 4 years ago. That's the battery then, first major change. I'll show you inside the van now some other changes we had to make. Right, so here is that new battery. Really good, seems to be working really well so far. It's got heating built into it and CAN bus connection here, which goes up to the Victron units. and this was the next major thing that we had to do. So the charger which I used to have, which I'm just going to go and get, this was the charger I used at the start. Really neat compact unit from Votronic, and this is called a triple charger. So it's got the solar MPPT charger in it, it's got battery to battery charger, and it's got the mains charger built in. Really good idea, I thought at the time. But the snag is you've got all your eggs in one basket, and I found when I was fitting the new battery that the mains charging part of this had actually failed. It did that before and they replaced it under warranty, but to be honest, a unit failing twice with the same fault gives me no confidence whatsoever. So this is going in the bin, and we've made the leap to what everybody else does, to the blue units. It's from Victron. So as you can see, this triple charger is only about the size of the mains charger from Victron, so I didn't have any space here to be able to fit the new stuff. So I made this swing out panel that enables the battery to battery chargers to go on the back wall, the Serbo GX unit there, and then the mains charger and the solar charger on the panel here, all cabled through so that the swinging the cables can take all that perfectly well. I've gone for two 50 amp battery to battery chargers, or DC-DC chargers, which give a theoretical 100 amps charge from the alternator while we're driving, and a 50 amp solar charger, and also a 50 amp mains charger. So we've got everything that we could need to top up this great big 560 amp hour battery. So that was a lot of work rejigging all of that and fitting it all, but I think it's worth it. It'll give us a hopefully reliable system that's good for the trip over to Canada. Another little job I did in the back here, just to tidy up the stowage here, I made this little aluminium box, just welded checker plate, and that sits on top of here, on top of the water tank. And I used to use a plastic box in here, but it was never quite right. I used to have to use a bungee to hold it down, whereas this, being bespoke, fits perfectly in there and locks down for that bit of useful stowage. All the windows we've had covered with anti-smash film, so partly as a security thing, but also protection against stone chips and things. You know, when we're on that Dempster highway, a truck comes past us the other way, we don't really want windows getting smashed, so that gives us a bit of extra security. Also fitted a 20 litre jerry can. Now this is another thing to bear in mind when you're shipping a van, because if a jerry can has had diesel in it or petrol, they won't allow it on the ship. So this is a brand new one, and I've had to print off a copy of the receipt and the date of purchase and everything, and that's got to be attached to it during shipping, so that the people, when they do the inspections, can see that it is brand new, never used, so there's no vapours inside there for the transit. And I just made this little aluminium stowage that locks over the spout of the can, so that you know, there's no risk of anybody taking it or taking the diesel out of our tank. And that'll give us about another 100 miles range with those 20 litres in there. Inside the van then, I've made these screens, which are again aluminium checker plate on a tube. And they fix on here, two panels bolted together with this strap here, and they slot onto these fixings here, and these are to provide a little bit of extra security during the shipping process, and also later in the trip when we're shipping around the Darien Gap and wherever else the van's out of our sight for a long time. And it's really just a bit of a deterrent, so that somebody in the cab of the van who's got to load it onto a ship or whatever isn't tempted to come into the back. And then I made these in the size and shape they are because these will double up when we arrive in Canada. these will come out, and I've got brackets on the roof rack, so these will go flat on the roof rack, and these actually form the platform on the roof, so that if we ever have to go up there and do anything, these are what we stand on, and that's why it was made out of this checker plate. As part of the changes to the electrical system, here's the display from the Victron servo unit, so we can just see what's going on with the batteries. I'm sure you're very familiar with this sort of thing. You see what charge we're getting from where and all that sort of nice stuff. And to add a little bit of extra practicality, our storage underneath this seat we used to access from this lift up panel underneath the seat, but actually it's a bit of a pain having to get the cushion off, get the table out of the way, so I've added these doors in the front now, so you can access everything nice and easily from there. We've also added some little bits and bobs, little bits of artwork, just to make the place a little bit more of a home from home. It's just nice to make it feel good, and little things that we've picked up from travels all over the place, just remind us of places we've been. And as always, when you're travelling, there's little things that break or get slightly worn, so I've gone along all our drawers, and the drawer runners, some of them needed a bit of adjustment and a bit of tweaking just to keep them in tip-top condition. And also our ladder, which pulls out of here to access the bed more easily, that needed a bit of just a bit of TLC really, just to get it back working properly. So that's perfect for climbing up into bed. A couple of things round front. Now the bonnet we had to have completely repainted because we'd got some stone chips on it, and I was cleaning it with a jet wash, and I managed to strip off a whole load of the clear coat on the bonnet, so it looked horrendous. So we took it back into the body shop, and they resprayed that for us. Now also we had a problem where there was the engine started sounding like a steam train, and there was stuff shooting out the top of the engine, so we had it in for service, so it's had a full oil change and all the fluids changed. But also what happened there, it was two of the injectors, the seals on the injectors were failing. But that was actually the two injectors, the seats were failing, so and those failed seats damaged the injectors, so we had to have two injectors changed on the engine as well. So fingers crossed, it's in tip-top condition, good for another tens of thousands of miles on the road. Now one other thing that we did, which wasn't too costly, but it was a bit of a mistake that I made. Sarah's laughing in the background because yeah, it wasn't good from that perspective. This is our Starlink router, and you might notice that this is the new, I think it's like the 3rd generation Starlink router, and that's because we had to buy a new one, and that's because I blew up our old one. Yeah, it wasn't a good day, and we're going to make a special video all about how I blew up our Starlink. So let's move on from that. That video will be coming out in due course. And this is the new router, all wired into a 12-volt supply, so we're not using the inverter to power Starlink, and the dish is permanently mounted on the roof. I've also made an aluminium cover which goes over the dish to protect it, partly during shipping, but also at any point when we want to provide that solid protection to the dish, so we don't basically damage another one. So perfect, works really well, doesn't use very much power. We'll update you when we're on the road about how much power it uses, but with the roaming tariff, it basically gives us really great internet connection at all times while we're on the road. You may have seen a previous video of ours all about fitting this air conditioning system, so this is another thing we did in preparation for this upcoming trip. Check back on that previous video if you want to learn more about fitting a Velit air conditioning system to your camper van. Yeah. Well, those are a few of the changes that we've made, or additions, modifications, in preparation for this trip over to Canada. Right, we're back here now on our bridge in this beautiful part of Nova Scotia, Canada. Now the process of shipping the van over, actually I think it was remarkably easy, wasn't it?
Seemed to be.
Yeah, we got quotes from lots of different shipping companies and settled on a company called IVSS, International Vehicle Shipping Services, and they were fantastic. Really, really good communication. And we had a telephone consultation with the guy there, Martin, who organises everything for you, and he was fantastic, super knowledgeable, laid a lot of our fears to rest, and really for the exchange of £4,500, they were able to get our van over here from Liverpool in the UK over to Halifax, Nova Scotia, in just 8 days. Really, really easy process. What we had to do was leave it at the port in Liverpool, and now we'd been told before we took the van to Liverpool that we had to leave it completely open so that it could be inspected, you know, customs people and everything could get in and look at every nook and cranny to make sure we weren't taking anything we shouldn't. And just while we're on that, anything organic, so any food, even in cans of food, we weren't allowed.
No sort of toilet, you can't take any toiletries, no liquids at all, no food products, dispensers, tinned, dried, nothing. You cannot have those in the van. We couldn't even take our coconut core blocks for the composting toilet.
And they're just dry, compressed cocoa because they're organic material, so nothing at all. And you saw in the van preparation section when I was back in the garage, we couldn't take our self-built battery either because they're scary lithium batteries. As it turned out, when we arrived at the port, the guy who met us there said, no, leave it locked. This is your home, you know, you want it to be secure. Stuff does get stolen on these. And we thought, really? But we thought, well, he's the guy at the port, he's loading these on, you know, all the time, he should know. So we took the risk and we left the back locked. You saw that we'd made the screens to separate the driver's cab from the rest of the van, so the back was completely secure during the shipping. I had sleepless nights thinking, are we going to get there and find that the locks had been drilled out of the back doors on the van so they could get in, or they'd cut the metal or whatever to get in there, or that we didn't get customs clearance and that it had been sent back to the UK or something crazy like that. But actually, when we got to the port and picked it up, it was still locked, hadn't been opened in any way whatsoever. Now, I wouldn't advise you to do that yourself. It's your risk entirely. But we took that risk and we've got away with it. So our van was completely secure during the crossing. And that's not to say that stuff would definitely get stolen. You know, lots of people do this crossing with their van open and nothing gets stolen. It's just once in a while something goes wrong.
We were actually told about a lady that had taken her vehicle over and had put the keys in a key safe, and had written a message left it on the key safe saying, if you need to get access to the vehicle, contact my telephone number and I'll let you into this box.
Which is, I think, best of both worlds. That's actually a really good idea. So in the future, when we ship anywhere else, we'll probably do something like that, won't we?
I think that's a great idea.
But we were able to get down to the port. We had to go to a different office in Halifax for customs. Their office is actually nowhere near the port. It was a 25-minute taxi ride from our hotel. That was about $25, wasn't it? I think Canadian dollars. So that's sort of 13, 14 British pounds. Met the very nice but very, very serious customs man who sorted us out, no problem at all. That took about 20 minutes. So we got the customs clearance, took the paperwork down to the port the next morning, having phoned ahead to make an appointment for that. And within no time, they showed us to the van, and it was absolutely perfect. Not a scratch, absolutely perfect. The only snag was that they'd left the keys in the ignition during the entire crossing, the 8 days. So the vehicle battery was completely dead, like totally killed, unable to recharge or anything. After an hour's drive, we started it with a booster pack. And after an hour's drive, when you'd expect to have some reasonable charge in the battery, it wouldn't start. The battery was totally dead. So the next day, we had to go and buy a new battery. So that was 250 Canadian dollars that we could have done without spending, but
it's all about money, this, Ben.
It is a bit.
Talking about money.
It's about money and it's about batteries. So, I mean, if that's the worst thing that happens, then we're doing okay, I think. You know, a new battery isn't the end of the world.
We also were not allowed to leave any other lithium batteries in the van. So that meant all Ben's power tools that had batteries, we had to take the batteries with us on the flight. So they were in our hand luggage. Also, we couldn't have the battery, we couldn't have our mosquito repellent thing. I can't remember the name of it, can you?
No.
But that was, that's obviously, that's a rechargeable battery, so you can't have those either. Are they lithium?
All the and all the drone batteries and everything. I mean, it seems crazy that it's. They seem to class it as safer to carry those things on an aircraft in your hand luggage than on a ship, which is on the sea. Now, obviously, I don't want to be responsible for setting fire to a ship that can carry thousands of vehicles and having that sink in the Atlantic. I also don't want to be responsible for setting fire to an aircraft while it's in the sky. So the rules are you can carry up to 20 batteries with you in your hand luggage, up to 100 watt hours. If they're over 100 watt hours, you can only carry 2 of that capacity. Mine were no more than 60 or 70 watt hours, and that includes the electric drill batteries and things. Also includes the booster pack for starting the engine on the van, and all the drone batteries and everything. So nothing was over 100 watt hours, so I was able to carry a bag full of batteries with me on the plane.
It means, of course, that we could not bring our electric bikes. Because we could have bought the bikes, but we couldn't bring the batteries. And when we made inquiries over here, the bikes that we had were not available, which meant that the batteries weren't available, so it was all too difficult. So we've decided to leave the bikes at home. We're going to try and manage without them, walk everywhere instead of cycling, and see how we get on. If the worst comes to the worst and we really are missing the bikes, then we'll perhaps look to buy some second-hand bikes somewhere over here.
Yeah, their batteries were way over the 100 watt hours limit for carrying on the plane. So
mega heavy.
Yeah, heavy. So so they stayed at home. But that's not the biggest problem in the world, is it?
No, not at all. I think we'll be okay.
Yeah. If you run an electric bike company over here in Canada and you want a couple of people in a camper van to try them out for you, just hit us up. We'll look after them for you.
Definitely.
Perfect. Right then, I suppose we need to sum up the costs of this trip so far, don't we?
Goodness.
You all want to know, don't you? How much does this sort of thing cost? And for that, I'm going to, excuse me being rude, but I've got to look at the phone to get it right. So the shipping, the actual shipping itself, £3,850. And then there was insurance at $300, import fees, $175, wharfage, $153, soil inspection, $75, documentation and handling, $75, for a total on the shipping of £4,588. Van insurance, I mentioned earlier, $1,270. Travel insurance, $2,230, and as we said, that's only for 6 months cover. The new battery that we had to get, that it turns out we didn't have to get because they didn't look in the back of the van. I could have brought the self-built one. That was $1,300.
No, you couldn't. You couldn't have lived with yourself. You couldn't. You wouldn't.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah. If we'd been caught with that,
you're a law-abiding man.
Yeah, generally speaking. So $1,300 for a new battery. The window film, that protective anti-smash film on the windows, was $850. The flights to Canada, and these are return flights, so to Halifax and then back home again from Whitehorse over in Yukon, that was $1,847, and the driving permits were £12. So that is the eye-watering total of £12,137, which sounds a lot, doesn't it, when you say it in one line like that?
It does sound a lot.
Of course it is a lot, but get it in perspective. That gives us 6 months over here. It gets the van here for as long as we want it here, and it's potentially going to be on this side of the Atlantic for 3 to 4 years. To hire a van like ours can cost $2,500 a week. I mean, there's all sorts of options, but it can cost that much. So we'd have only got 4 or 5 weeks rental of a van for that much money, that same amount of money. So all in all, when you divide that cost out over a long trip, it's not actually that much.
No.
The other advantage of travelling over here is actually lots of other stuff is a lot cheaper than it is in Europe. Fuel, for example. Somebody in America commented to us, oh, you're not going to like the cost of diesel in Canada because it's so expensive. Well, it turns out in Canada, diesel is about 2/3 the price of what it is in Britain, half the price of what it is in some places in Europe. In France, it can be €2 a litre. So that price really adds up very quickly. The other thing is that over here, we're travelling a lot more slowly than we have in Europe. On our last trip up to the north of Norway, we did 6,500 miles in 2.5 months. On this trip, the first 5 months here, we're going to be covering about 8,500 miles, but that's going to be over 5 months. So that works out to 650 miles a week in Scandinavia and 400 miles a week here. So many fewer miles per week, plus the fuel is 2/3 the price. So week by week, we're going to be spending a lot less money on travelling over here, aren't we?
Yeah, we hope.
Yeah.
And we found other things as well. I think, I mean, we haven't done that much shopping yet, but food is not necessarily cheaper. But if you eat out, it is, when you compare it to the UK. Having drinks and food out does seem to be cheaper, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I'd say all those costs that Ben mentioned, an awful lot of money, but I think you have to take into consideration as well that some of those costs were impacted by the size of the vehicle, the age of us, you know, so I'm sure, you know, you can get over here cheaper with your car, with your van. I'm sure you can, if you're 30 years of age and you've got a VW little camper van, perhaps.
Here's the first vehicle coming down this road that we've seen all day. Probably wondering what on earth are those people doing standing on a bridge with a stick in the hand.
Probably.
Yeah, I mean the cost of insurance would be dramatically less if you were younger.
Oh gosh, and you wouldn't have to go home every 6 months.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you can get 12-month nomad insurance easily for younger people. So it's crazy, isn't it? You wait till you're retired so you can afford to do this sort of thing, and then the insurance companies nobble you.
Oh well.
Yeah. Such is life.
Yeah. I think we got creatures crawling on us.
Really?
Yeah. You've got. Oh, it's gone down your shirt. Get it out. It's probably a biting thing.
Yeah.
It's gone right down.
All right, well,
you're going to have to open up.
It's probably not the end of the world.
No, well. It was on my face earlier. Just make sure it's come out. I'm just making sure it's come out.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay, it's nothing.
Could have been.
Right, we've dealt with the critter down my shirt. No problem at all. It wasn't an alligator or anything. It was something very, very small.
Could have been something bitey.
Yeah, could have
been.
Right, that's where we're going to leave this video for now, isn't it?
That's good.
Our introduction to Canada. So far we've had a week here and it's been splendid. There is some snow predicted for the next day or two, so let's see what happens on that one. And next week's video will be properly back in the swing of travelling, and you'll see a lot more of this beautiful country.
Yep, that's it for now then. So don't forget to like and subscribe, click the thumbs up button, is that right?
Yeah, do all that stuff.
Do all that stuff.
Smash those buttons.
I've forgotten the thing to say.
Yeah, it's been a while.
And we will see you on the next video.
Yeah, smash those buttons and see you then.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.